Yo, what's up, guys? Marquez here. This is Miles.
What's up?
So you've probably seen his face before, but he's been behind the scenes here on the Autofocus channel for a little while now. But we recently got the opportunity to shoot a pretty insane car, the successor to the Bugatti Chiron. And there's a ton of hype about this, and everyone kept telling me, you gotta see that car. It's like the sickest thing ever. But I had an Ultimate Frisbee tournament at that exact date, so I couldn't see it.
So I was very happy to step in and check the car out, and you're right, it's a pretty insane car, and I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by what this ends up being.
Yeah, so we just want to explain why it's Miles hosting the video and not me, but more importantly, enjoy this first look at what I think is going to probably be a pretty iconic car for the next decade or so. Enjoy.
All right, so yes, I'm not Marquez, but let me explain. I'm here for a very good reason. Right here is the successor to the Bugatti Chiron, standing right in front of me. We don't have a name quite yet on what this is going to be called. That's not going to be revealed for like another few months, but this is the car. So let's check it out, because there's a lot of interesting tech that I want to dig into. Yeah, let's check this out. So the main thing that we're noticing now aesthetically is that the doors go up now, which is cool. And that's something that was always, I guess, missing with the other Bugatti models. It's not something I felt like they needed to do, but it's cool. It's a nice little aesthetic differentiator between this and the Chiron. But man, this car looks sick. We noticed that it's very similar to the Chiron, right? But it has a lot more subtlety, elegance, and yet it's still a lot more aggressive. You've got these cutouts right here, which are for airflow, which is channeling air through the bottom of the car, up through the top, and then out over the spoiler in the back. There's definitely some stuff in the interior that we're going to dig into, but for now, let's focus on this. This is the centerpiece of the car right here. So instead of downsizing to a V10 or a V8 or a six-cylinder like some other manufacturers are doing right now, Bugatti Rimac is now doing a V16 naturally aspirated 8.3 liter engine in this car. So for reference, the previous model, the Chiron, was a W16 with quad turbos, and it was an 8-liter displacement. So instead of making the engine smaller, they made it bigger and took the turbos away. So now it revs to a glorious 9,000 RPM, which is, I mean, who doesn't love that? A 9,000 RPM Bugatti engine. If you're familiar with cars that rev to that number, some cars that come to mind, the Porsche 911 GT3, for example, those are cars that sound amazing. So we now have a Bugatti that's going to have the sound to match everything else in this car, including the performance, which we should also dig into. So this car is now going to be putting out 1,000 horsepower from the engine alone, and that's without turbos, like I said. So a naturally aspirated V16 now putting out 1,000 horsepower. But wait, there's more. So in the front of the car here, we have 2 electric motors and a battery that's right behind the passenger seat, and that is adding an additional 800 horsepower to the car. So we've got a total power output of 1,800 horsepower, so very similar to the Rimac's Navara, but in a lighter, more elegant body. Not to hate on the Navara, because that car is awesome, and we have a video on that on the Autofocus channel if you want to check that out. But this is where the Rimac's technology starts to come into play, with Bugatti and Rimac's now being partnered, or basically one kind of company in a sense. And so we're expecting about 37 miles of range if you're driving conservatively from the battery and electric motor alone. So just like the Holy Trinity hypercars of the past, you'll now have some electric range if you don't want to wake up your neighbors in the morning with that 9,000 RPM V16 engine, which is it's nice to see, but it's mostly for the performance gains that you're going to be getting with this car. And something else I want to point out is that you see this wide diffuser here, this absolutely massive diffuser, which, by the way, now has the tires exposed on the back of the car, which is freaking sick. This diffuser starts where the seats are. So that's how long this diffuser is, and Mate walked me through the car and kind of explained to me how this makes a huge benefit in the aerodynamics department. It is going to allow this car to have an even higher top speed of 277 miles per hour, I believe, which is, I think, about like 10 or 15 more than the Chiron, or at least the base model Chiron. And so you don't have any big crazy wings like a 911 GT3, but you are going to have an active aero wing, which mostly just acts as an air brake to help you slow down, because this car has a lot of power and you're going to need to stop as well as you can start, right? But once again, to keep the car as light as they possibly can, we've got a carbon monocoque chassis. So there are some pictures that I'll throw in of what this car looks like naked, and it almost looks as good naked as it does with, you know, the shell on. And that kind of sounds weird out of context, but you get what I'm saying. What's really interesting is the interior, because I think they've done some really cool things here. So if you know Bugatti, you know Bugatti is known to be rather conservative when it comes to all the tech and digitizing of the entertainment experience on the inside. And once again, they're keeping it very simple here, but also extremely sophisticated. So Bugatti Rimac has partnered with a Swiss watch company to make this very elegant looking gauge cluster right here. So everything you're seeing here is pretty much exactly how the car is going to look in its final form when it hits the road in 2026. But here's your tachometer. Here is, I think, your power output, and then you have a bunch of other little tiny gauges right here. But the cool thing is that you can now turn the wheel and not disrupt what you're seeing on the gauge cluster at all. So you basically have two twin spokes that turn here on the stock, and yeah, this controls everything, and it makes for a very interesting visual experience when just turning the wheel when driving, which I have not done yet, but just when turning the wheel, it's yeah, it looks dope. And then you have your little paddle shifters right here. And then another cool interesting thing to point out is that right there where that B logo is, you have a screen. So Bugatti typically doesn't like to do screens, but a lot of customers are going to want something like Apple CarPlay because that's just a common thing to have now. So I don't think it's functional on this prototype model right here, but essentially a display will pop out of that little rectangular cutout right there and then flip horizontally to become a tiny little display that can support Apple CarPlay, and I don't think Android Auto, but maybe that'll come at some point in the future. Comment down below, how many Bugatti owners do you think use an Android phone rather than an iPhone? I'd actually be really curious to know. And then something else that's really interesting to point out, so we have the Koenigsegg somewhat inspired steering wheel gauge cluster situation right here, but then you also have a LaFerrari inspired seating situation. So these seats are fixed. They can go up, like up and down, but they can't go back and forth because of the tight constraints as far as like how much they had to fit into this chassis. So instead of moving the seats back and forth, you are moving the pedal box back and forth, very similar to a LaFerrari if you're familiar with how that car works. One thing that I also really like is this LED light bar right here that looks really cool and stands out when you're looking at it from the outside of the car. And then right here are some crystal glass knobs, and the big one in the middle is to control, you know, drive, neutral, reverse, etc. So this is all cool stuff. You can really see this theme of Bugatti taking lots of cool elements from other hypercars like the Koenigsegg's, the Ferraris, the high revving engines like you've seen in other supercars, and then combining that with all the stuff that they do best, which is elegance, build quality, aerodynamics, top speed. It's really an awesome amalgamation of interesting ideas all into one car. So like I said, we still don't have a name yet, but we do know that this car is going to start at a measly little $4.6 million. So yeah, not a cheap car at all. But I mean, it looks great. I feel like they've pretty much given us everything with this car, you know? The only thing that Bugattis were really lacking was the sound, and now we've got that too. I'll play the sound clip of what the engine should sound like right now. Yeah, so we have the sound, we have the power, we have the acceleration. We're expecting about a 2-second 0 to 60 with this car. It'll probably be a little bit faster if I were to guess. So is this the perfect car? It's hard to say. We don't have one on the road that's been driven and reviewed yet, but hopefully that's something that could happen in the future. But so far on paper, this car is looking pretty good. But that's about it. Thanks for checking this out, and you know, I know this is a bit different of a video than usual, given that it's not the regular host for this channel, but man, it was awesome to come out here, and this is the Chiron successor. So that's about it. I'm going to go gawk at this thing some more. All right, talk to you guys later.